Right. And do you think did he become a true Indigenous person? You write that Buckley had been assigned the role of a lifetime to take on the disguise
Yeah.
of someone he had never met in a social network that differed vastly from anything he had ever known.
He didn't understand it, yeah.
He didn't understand it. Do you think that he felt that he should become like an Indigenous person? And what was it about his character
Yeah.
that they accepted him as opposed to, wanting to kill him immediately?
Yeah, well, they weren't going to kill him because now they saw he was family. But it doesn't mean anything. He still has to acclimatise himself, embed himself, for want of a better word, into an Aboriginal culture. And I think one of the great things about his character, you asked me about his character, very amenable. He was a giant, and a determined giant, but very gentle. So he loved the Aboriginal kids. He played with them as if he was their uncle. And he played with them as if he really was one of them. So in his character, he didn't differ probably so much from the man, except he didn't know what was going on a lot of the time. He couldn't speak their language. It would have taken him probably 2 years. A lot of language experts say that probably took him 2 years before he could speak the language reasonably. And once he spoke it, then he understood that he was seen as a white person, and he understood the cultures, he understood the country. He became, in my opinion, at least 85 or 90% a Wadawurrung man. And you asked me earlier, he became an Aboriginal person, in my opinion, pretty much.
In reading the book, one of the things I noticed, I'm waiting for him to challenge the people.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for him to say, right, I've got to get out of here. And in attempting to do that, he will commit actions that are against the Aboriginal community policies and procedures, if you'd call it that. But he never does. He never does. He does get slowly disillusioned with certain aspects of the book, of the community, and we'll go into it as anybody would.
Yeah.
But there goes again saying something about his actual character, that he just seems to go with the flow.
He's very good at going with the flow. He does become, later in the book, there's a big incident where it's quite, I won't go too far into it, but he does become disenfranchised from his Aboriginal friends, and he goes to live alone. And in that lonely time, I think I'm getting this right, that he met a lovely young 15-year-old woman, and he lived with her for a long time, and he wasn't sort of bothered by the Aboriginal people, because he did have some problems with Aboriginal society. But I won't go into them. He didn't work out perfectly. I said that he's a Wadawurrung man, and in many ways he was, but there was still some what you want to call it, white European aspects to him that clashed with their culture. And that happens later in the book. I won't go into exactly how that happened, but he didn't perfectly fit with the Aboriginal society.
Now, whilst he didn't, and would be very difficult to, for anybody, but I think from my understanding and from what I read, is that he was amazed at the way they were able to survive. Very rudimentary approach to life.
Yeah, rudimentary but brilliant.
Absolutely.
This is what I find. I got out of the book. People ask me, well, what did you learn? I knew most Australians not enough about Aboriginal country. When I see how they use the land and the relationship they have with the land, I know it sounds cliche, but I'm just in awe of these people. And everything had a purpose and a meaning. They would use, when they ate an animal, for instance, all parts of that animal were used for all kinds of things, whether it be medicinal, clothing, for it could be any kind of tools of some sort. There's a good story in there about they used to eat the echidnas, the spiny echidnas. And I thought, surely, what could they use the echidna? And then you find out that they use the echidna as a needle. So when the echidna, and so they can, do operations with the. I mean.
And they use a lot of the bones for jewellery, and they fashion garments out of the skins and pellets. And in fact, they lived a very sustainable lifestyle because they used everything.
And I made this point, I thought it was important in the book, that Buckley knew white agriculture because he was coming from a farming community, and you sow the crops and you wait for them to come. The Aborigines didn't have to wait. They knew that if on this particular day, at this particular season, they could get the berries here. Move on, and 2 weeks later, this other other fruit or whatever would be coming into bloom. They moved around because they didn't have to plant anything in one place. It was all coming to them. And they cultured it as well. And they made sure they knew when eel season was. So they'd make sure there were eel traps. And Buckley would have learned all this stuff. And in the end, he would have been just as adept at hunting and foraging and knowing when things came in. He built traps for bream and smoked the bream the Aboriginal way. And he did some incredible things and learnt them and became totally self-sufficient. The bumbling Buckley that you see at the beginning becomes an adept hunter forager by the end of it, and he was also he would have been a great warrior too. I think the Aborigines, once he became adept, although we don't know that he was in combat at any point, but I think he was very adept with a spear, and he was quite feared, I believe, by them as a great warrior.
Do you think in that time, although you don't write about it, and it's completely hypothetical, what must have been going through his mind in terms of his being able to continue being alive? Because one of the aspects of that culture was that if someone died, whether it was, they had two sides, either you die of a natural death or it was supernatural, and then someone had to pay for that death.
This is payback, yes.
That's right. And now we have an instance there where that seriously affected and where he became disillusioned with.
That was the big incident. I think the interesting.
Was he always? Do you think he might have always been in fear of his life?
No, because he might have been in fear of his life from foreigners, as they call it. I think the word they used was mainmat. I don't know if I pronounced it.
Yes.
So if you weren't, let me put some perspective. He was part of the Wadawurrung, which was part of a nation of 5 tribes around Port Phillip Bay. And they were all very close. They'd intermarried. They probably had fights too, but they'd always resolve it, and they'd talk to each other. The Kulin people, the Kulin nation. Now, outside that, you started to become more foreign. And yes, some of them were well known, so they'd have some, but the further and further away, they would be seen as mainmat or sorcerers. So it's like the way we used to talk about Johnny Foreigner. Johnny Foreigner is a bad guy, and they'd think the same way. So Buckley has an incident where his family is seen as the foreigner, and they come to get him, and they come to get his family, I should say. I don't want to go into that too much.
No, that's right.
But it's an important part of how Aboriginal society worked, and something that he had trouble with.
Yes, right.